Hey friends, welcome to my channel. Let's get started.
This first project today is going to be this vintage looking bird cage, and I'm starting out taking this wire hanging planter basket from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to remove that hanging wire part, the hook. Yeah, the hook, that's what it is, and set that aside because we don't need it. Next up, I'm just going to take some foam core board, trace out my circle, and cut that out. And I'm going to use all of these paints to give a faux wood look to my foam core board circle that we cut out. So first I'm taking the color Mineral and I am covering the entire foam circle. Now, if you are familiar with Peppermint Cactus, she does some amazing foam core board projects, and I've only watched like one or two of her videos. I'll link her channel below, but she has some fantastic methods, I guess you would say, for making foam board look like faux wood and other things. So I just kind of took that inspiration and layered on all of these different tones of browns until I was happy with the look that I got. So again, I am just layering on each of these different colors while the paint is still wet, and I'm also using the same brush. I was going to use different brushes for each color, but I realized it was probably better to get that true blended faux wood look using the same brush. And I think this turned out so amazing, and I want to try this on other materials. While I wait for this paint to dry, I am taking these longer dowel rods that you can find at the Dollar Tree, along with this hula skirt you can also find at the Dollar Tree with their summer decor. So I'm going to take one dowel rod, line it up with each of these metal wire parts on our hanging planter. I'm going to hot glue that in place. Now, I know that hot glue and metal do not get along very well, so that is where our hula skirt is going to come in handy. The hot glue did help hold it in place long enough for me to be able to take the hula skirt, pull off a couple of strands, and then wrap it around my dowel and that wire piece. I wrapped it around maybe 6 times and then hot glued it in place, and these dowels are not going anywhere. I just repeated this process all the way around my wire basket. Next, I wanted to glue the dowel rods down to the foam core round circle. And the way I got this to work, because you can see that those dowels are sticking out farther than where the foam core board is, they're not exactly straight up and down. So I started with opposing sides. So I glued one side, turned it around 180 degrees, glued the other side, and then I did like the opposing sides again. I hope that makes sense. And then I went around and glued everything in between. So once I had that all glued down, and it worked out just fine, nothing popped off, it all stayed in place where I wanted it. Now I'm taking some wooden beads, and this is a part I didn't entirely think through before I just started gluing them down. So I wanted to put the larger beads all the way around, but they wouldn't really fit in between all of my spaces. So I had to grab just like random sizes and just use whatever would work. And I have like some smaller ones, some medium ones, some bigger ones, and there is absolutely no rhyme or reason to how they're sitting around the edge. And I think it actually gave it a pretty unique look, but it definitely wasn't what I had intended to do originally. So once I had all of that figured out, I'm just taking my ivory chalk paint, and I gave all of the wooden beads and the dowels one coat of paint, and then I gave the black wire basket 2 coats. So I was okay with some of that brown or wood tone showing through a little bit on the wooden pieces. Next, I'm just going to dry brush again. So I'm taking some mineral, some of the fawn, and some of the antique waverly wax. And similar to what I did on the foam core board, I am just, this time I'm dry brushing. And I'm just going around all of the wooden beads, everything that I just painted white to give a distressed look. And once I was happy with that, I took some nautical rope from the Dollar Tree and I'm gluing this around the bottom to cover up the bottom of the dowel rods, that foam core board, and like any hot glue that was seeping out on the bottom of the beads. Next, I'm taking these little, I don't even know what these are, like little fruit dishes you can find from the Dollar Tree. They're plastic. They are in like the cookware section maybe, or the glassware section. And I'm just doing the exact same process that I did to all of the wood parts, giving it that distressed look, and then adding this little finial guy right on top. Next, I'm taking some jute cord, wrapping it around that top, and then I glue this on top of my little bird cage. I was completely out of frame for that, so I just didn't even show it. Then for the last step, you could have left it there. I actually did, and then the next day I was like, no, it's kind of still missing something. So I grabbed some more jute cord and wrapped it all around the dowels and that wire frame just to give it a little added detail, and I think this was the perfect finishing touch. And I also added one more row of the jute cord around the bottom and then burned off all of the little fraying bits. And that was it for this one, but before I show you the final reveal, we are going to do one additional project. So I'm taking two different birdhouses that I got from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to paint them with opposing colors. So first I'm painting the roof and the base of this one in the color Fawn from Waverly, and then I'm going to paint the body in the color Mineral. And for that second house, I'm going to use the opposite colors, so the roof will be Mineral and the body will be Fawn. Once I have those painted, I'm taking this napkin that I've just had laying around and I'm going to peel it apart because we're going to decoupage this on parts of the birdhouse. So I'm just ripping up pieces that I want to put on top. And again, I'm doing this on opposing parts of the two birdhouses. So one, I'm adding the decoupage to the roof and to the base. And on the other one, I will add the decoupage to the body. And I just very gently take my decoupage glue and put it over top of the napkins as well as underneath. Next, I'm going to distress everything to give it that same vintage feel that our bird cage has. So I'm taking my Waverly wax and going all around the edges of my decoupage napkin paper parts. Then I'm taking some ivory and I am just dry brushing all over along with some antique Waverly wax to give it that distressed and weathered look. Once that's complete, I took a dowel rod, cut it into two different lengths, and I'm grabbing these circle pieces that work in a variety pack that came from the Dollar Tree, and I am gluing the dowel rod in between two of the circles. And this is going to be the stand or the base for our bird houses. And then I just painted these exactly like I did with the birdhouse, ivory, and then distress them with the mineral, fawn, and antique wax. And I'm going to glue it to the bottom of my birdhouse. For a final touch here, I'm taking some Spanish moss and gluing it right down to the bottom of the bird hole so that it looks like a little nest that is inside of there. Then I just take some reindeer moss and I glued this down on like varying parts of my birdhouse just to give a little color, and then I placed some in the bottom of the bird cage as well, and here is how it turned out. I absolutely love this. It turned out better than I had envisioned it to, and I am just absolutely in love with this. You could style this in so many different ways. You could add some candles to the bottom, add some greenery, add some florals. You don't have to be so literal as I was and put some birdhouses in there. I think I will end up changing this up, but I just think it is perfect for now. up, we have these beautiful little burlap looking planter frames, and I'm taking 3 of these shadow boxes from the Dollar Tree, removing the little hanger part from them, and then also taking my X-Acto knife just to run it along the edge and then be able to push that backer out away from the frame. Next, I'm taking some burlap that I have and just cutting it down to size. So we're going to cover the backs of these signs because the front, I didn't want to worry about having to paint it and all of that, and the burlap looked nicer against that background. So I'm going to cut it down and then just fray the edges by pulling off some of the strings around the sides of the burlap. Next, I'm going to Mod Podge this burlap down to the sign. So I put a pretty good layer on the bottom, place down my burlap, and then I'm just covering about a half an inch to an inch around all 4 sides of the burlap. I didn't cover the whole thing. I didn't think it was necessary. This worked out just fine, but feel free to cover the whole thing if that's what you prefer. Next up, I found these mini cups from the Dollar Tree, and you can see that they're a little bit smaller than even the smallest terracotta pots that the Dollar Tree carries. You could have really used either one of these. I thought the plastic cups were a little easier because I wanted to cut them in half, and my husband was not home to help me cut the terracotta pots. But I love the way these ones turned out anyways, so I'm just going to give them, I think I gave them 3 coats of the ivory chalk paint. And then I also painted my frames with the ivory chalk paint as well so that it all had the same cohesive look. Then I'm going to distress all of my frames. So using that same technique, I'm using fawn, mineral, and then my antique Waverly wax to give this a nice distressed look. And for the antique Waverly wax, I really just focused on all of the corners and the edges of the frames. I don't think I showed this part, but next I just glued the backer onto the frame itself, and then I'm taking the little cups, hot gluing them right down into the center of my burlap backer. So you can see there I painted a little brown stripe with my fawn color. I thought it was a little too dark, so I ended up going over it with just a very light coat of my ivory chalk paint to tone it down, added some lavender into my cups, and that's it for this one. What do you guys think? I think these are absolutely adorable. I think those cups actually look like they could be like vases. I think you could distress them or add a little bow. I decided not to do that because I like the simplicity of how they looked as they are. Next up, we have the easiest project in today's video, these little mason jar lanterns. So this was actually a Pinterest-inspired decor piece. You can see that in the bottom of the screen there. And what I'm going to do is take this Mod Podge, pour it into a little souffle cup. You don't even have to use Mod Podge. You could use any type of glue for this, really. This is just what I grabbed. And then I'm going to add a little splash of water and mix those up really well. I didn't measure anything, so the consistency I came up with was pretty good. I probably used like 1 part Mod Podge and like maybe half a part water. So then I'm just going to completely immerse my yarn that it was from the Dollar Tree into that glue mixture. It doesn't matter what yarn you use. It doesn't matter the color that you use because we will be removing it. So you don't want the yarn to be too wet with that glue, so I just ran my finger pulling off any of that excess. And then I'm going to start wrapping it around my mason jar. So this mason jar I just had laying around my house. You can find mason jars at the Dollar Tree, or they are even cheaper if you buy them in bulk at Walmart. So I did end up redoing this a few times because I wasn't quite happy with the way it was wrapping, but there was just no rhyme or reason to it, whatever is pleasing to your eye. Before I went in and painted it, I did let that yarn completely dry and be hard to the touch. And then I used about 3 coats of paint to cover this whole thing. And you don't want to put too much paint on your brush because you don't want it seeping underneath of that yarn. Once the paint was dry, I just pulled off the yarn to reveal the glass underneath. And this was not perfect. And then you could see where I was pulling it up, the paint kind of like peeled back a little bit. It wasn't that big of a deal to me, but I did just take some Goo Gone on a Q-tip and rubbed along all of the lines just to make sure they were, at least the line part of the glass was nice and crisp. And that's it for this one. You could absolutely add some embellishments to this. You could add a jute twine bow or some ribbon. You could add some more color and distressing. You could paint these any color you wanted, really. But I loved the little simplicity of these pieces. And here's how they look with just some tea light candles in them. This would be so fun on the back deck for like a little summer party or get together. You could also use these as a vase, throw some flowers in there or add in some fairy lights. But I will tell you, I did not love the fairy light look because you could really see every single little brush stroke from when I painted it. So I would prefer the tea light instead. But that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this and let me know which of these projects was your favorite, and I'll see you in the next one.